dangerous and unpredictable. And it's no coincidence the biggest officer at the Vermont State Police St. Albans Barracks was chosen to conduct its open interrogation. And I just feel okay. We do this. I don't make sure anybody that comes in here. Right from the social wall. We're just always hyper-visible. Yeah. Obviously, make yourself comfortable. I think they should hang it for hungry. Yeah. Or you what were you doing? Just on the gas station? Yeah, sure. We on set. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Imagine for a moment being told to go into a room with a man who just basically made his life, but as if you have done nothing wrong, and though he was a harmless stranger in need of assistance. Your outward demeanor must show no judgment, no suspicion, and certainly no fear. While maintaining such an artificial calm in front of such an unpredictable threat, many people would jump at the sudden clatter of metal from his pocket knife being tossed across the table. And while this officer reveals the smallest crack in composure from the sheer abruptness of it, he immediately blends into the moment and maintains the desired atmosphere. What you're seeing here from the officer is deception, 100% pure choreography, and a particular form of psychological maneuvering that just so happens to work perfectly with this individual's personality. Anytime Joseph tries to be funny or charming, the officer responds in the appropriate manner to protect the ego. You will notice he completely strips the atmosphere of its gravity and ensures there is no tension or awkwardness in the exchange. The reason it works so well in this specific circumstance is because Joseph Berlazzo, in our opinion, is a raging fucking narcissist. He's so incredibly susceptible to the external validation from the officers that he genuinely seems to believe they've taken a strong liking to him, and that he's able to control the environment through his super chill, laid-back personality. To give you some context, Joseph will go on to plead not guilty to all charges. So let's briefly jump ahead 3 years to his trial, and hear in his own words how he supposedly ended up in this interrogation chair. Be seated, everyone. Does the defense wish to present a case, Ms. J?
Yes, thank you. We call Joseph Verlaza. So, Joseph, we're going to take things one subject at a time, okay?
Very good.
How are you feeling this morning?
Very nervous, very anxious, very tired. Yeah.
Okay. Reach a point where you feel you need a break. Let us know, please.
Yes.
The act he's trying to project here is that of a traumatized husband, a man who had no choice but to save his own life from an abuser. He frequently widens his eyes and performs these hard swallows to convey heightened vulnerability and emotional shock, gestures that appear semi-convincing during direct examination, but will completely fall apart under cross-examination.
So let's start with some easy information. Where were you born?
I was born in Pennsylvania, in Reading, Pennsylvania.
When did you move to Vermont?
I moved to Vermont in 2012.
Were you working as a tattoo artist at that time?
Yes, I was.
When did you meet Emily?
I met Emily in 2018.
And to be clear, we're talking about Emily Verlaza, who was your wife, right?
Yes.
How did you meet her?
Well, I had initially met her through her friend Lauren. I can't remember her last name. Lauren.
Lauren was an apprentice in his tattoo shop who one day brought in her best friend Emily for a piercing.
When she left, I made a comment to Lauren. I said that. I was like, that friend of yours is something special. I said I wouldn't mind making her my next ex-wife. Um, Lauren laughed.
You didn't start dating her at that point.
No. I think she was. I think she was seeing somebody else, and I was seeing somebody else.
Emily returns to the shop to get a tattoo. He claims that she called him afterwards, whereas records indicate he was the one who called her.
She wanted to have more tattooing done. She's like, "Oh my god, like I really love this tattoo, like, and now I want more." A week and a half, 2 weeks later, she's back getting more tattoos. I'm asking her how she's been in the last 2 weeks, how her tattoo healed. Um, her demeanor was different. She told me she had just broken up with her boyfriend. She dyed her hair a different color. She was extremely flirty, and I was receptive to that. I was like, "Wow, like you really seem like pretty open today." Like, and I asked her if she wanted to go um, have a motorcycle ride and see a tour of some of Vermont.
And did she?
Yes, she did. Yes, we took a motorcycle ride that evening.
So after that night, when did you see Lauren next? I keep saying Lauren. Emily next.
Um, the next day.
They hung out every day for the rest of the summer and eventually got married in October.
So you were happy?
I was happy.
Did she seem to be happy?
Yes, she was.
And during these first few months of your relationship, um, well, I've already asked you. You said it was euphoric, and you were both happy, right?
Yes, that's right.
What's the matter? You're looking a little.
Yeah, I'm feeling very emotional right now.
What's bothering you?
I miss her.
Let me know when you're ready to start again.
I'm okay.
You're okay?
Okay.
He claims the first several months of the marriage were happy before things started going downhill.
It led to it led to violence and
Well, explain what you mean.
like physical abuse started coming into our relationship.
The only evidence of physical abuse in their relationship was of him abusing her, which colleagues in their work circles had suspected was going on.
Where she would go through my phone and then respond uh, by beating on me.
Was she saying anything to you while this was happening?
Yeah, just really, she was really angry. So, you're a fucking asshole. I don't want to. Do I have to swear? Do I have to?
I want you to say what she
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, she would say, you're a fucking asshole. I can't believe you're still fucking talking to this bitch. And it was a friend of mine that I'd known for years, and I told her that I would stop being physical with this friend, and that our relationship wasn't going to dissolve because we were friends since 2014. Like,
was she angry?
yes, she was. Yes, she was very angry. Yes, she was assaulting me
So she was verbally
verbally.
angry
Yes.
and physically
Yes, ma'am.
hitting.
Yes, physically.
And did you ever hit her back?
No, ma'am.
You never contacted the police about any of the times that she assaulted you.
The technical term for what you're seeing here is called drawing the sting. It's when the defense raises a damaging issue themselves before the prosecution can exploit it. And Joseph here seems to have practiced this one in the mirror a few times.
No, it's not their business.
Not their business. That's a motto that you live your life by, isn't it?
I'm an independent person. I'm a very private person. I don't want to dump my crap on other people.
They then got a dog, bought a camper van, and went to Bolton, Vermont for their 1-year wedding anniversary.
This was our first like road trip as a family. So it was very exciting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Emily too, she was in a good mood.
Yeah, she was super excited to take Rosie out, and she was stoked to meet Nikki and Ariel.
Nikki is his sister, and Ariel is her boyfriend, who they were meeting up with for the anniversary. The first night they got there, while alone together in the camper van, he claims Emily started becoming combative, saying the anniversary idea was terrible and the camper van was stupid.
So I was like, yo, like, maybe just like pour yourself a drink and relax.
He then takes the dog out for a walk and brings his handgun with him.
It has tritium sights on it, so you can see in the dark. And that was I had seen some what I believe to be coyote. Um, I like shone a flashlight and I saw a couple sets of eyes in the dark. So Remington's a pretty small dog, and I just wanted to be able to protect her.
When he gets back into the camper van, he claims Emily starts berating him about the candles he lit earlier being too bright.
And I said, it's not that bright. Like, you could always just roll over. Um, she got up and ran at me and grabbed one of the candles.
He claims that she begins attacking him with a candlestick.
Where?
She hit me in like my neck and head and in my arms. I was like blocking. I had to restrain her. I had to like physically grab her by her arms and like hold her arms down. Um, and she kept kicking. She actually kicked Remy.
He says that he manages to push her onto the side of the bed and she calms down.
I told her that that we're not your punching bags, and
You said what?
I told her that we weren't her punching bags.
We weren't.
She kicked Remy.
For the record, Emily adored animals, and this statement was deemed extremely implausible by her peers. Joseph, on the other hand, was accused by his ex-girlfriend of kicking her dog on 2 separate occasions.
And she was kicking me and punching me, and I pushed her back. And I told Remy, I was like, "Yo, we're gonna take a walk."
After the second walk, he gets back into the camper van, drinks a vodka and Coke, then starts getting into his side of the bed.
So I was climbing over her, and she shouted, "Fuck off!" And she like threw an elbow at me, and elbowed me in my groin. And I said, "No more hitting." And so we had like a bunch of throw pillows that we like lined around the bed, like the top of the bed where we slept. So one of the throw pillows was right there, and I swatted her with the throw pillow, and I said, "Stop hitting."
Please remember these next 17 seconds, which we're calling the phony fugue state. He tries to present a foggy, dissociated moment of recollection, with long pauses, forced ums, and a vacant stare. But it's pure performance, and we know it's performance because he'll completely contradict this manner of recollection during cross-examination.
And that's when that's when it happened.
What happened?
She said, "That's it, you're dead," and she threw her arm under her pillow.
He earlier made the claim that both him and Emily slept with handguns under their pillows, also deemed highly implausible by witness testimony.
And she pulls her hand out with the Taurus. And
How were you feeling?
I was feeling just horrified. Just
Were
like
you afraid?
I was terrified. Like there was like as soon as I saw that, like I just felt like this like wave of heat, like just like red hot. And she started like pushing her body up in an instant, and I'm like, "No, no, 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 no." And like I don't know, like it wasn't she wasn't stopping. And uh I had uh I had my I was holding my Glock.
He'll later claim he was in the process of putting the gun under his own pillow.
And she started just like coming up at me, and I just fired.
Why?
She was gonna shoot me.
And you were afraid.
Very.
From this point forward, he claims to have no memory of the events that followed until he woke up in a police cell 3 days later. But according to corroborated evidence and witness testimony, he had breakfast with his sister the next morning, where he ordered a goat cheese omelet, a side of bacon, and a samosa. He then gave his sister a tattoo. When his sister asked where Emily was, he told her she was sleeping. He then sent a string of text messages to Emily's phone number. The next day, he went to a bonfire party where he was seen taking bong hits and doing keggers. Later that same evening, he would send Emily another series of text messages. He went for pancakes and a samosa once again the next morning, then sent Emily one final message. It would be shortly after this message that Emily's mother asked Joseph where her daughter was and why her phone had been switched off for so long. He told her they had gotten into a fight and that he hadn't seen Emily in roughly 2 days. Emily was then reported missing. Roughly 7 hours later, as Joseph's friend was driving him back to where the camper van was parked, they noticed police had cordoned off the area. Joseph then told his friend to stop the car, at which point he got out and wandered off into the woods. His next known location was at a maple fields 10 miles away, roughly 14 hours later, where by pure happenstance he was spotted by a police officer.
And what was he doing?
He was getting a drink out of the cooler and sort of stepping back from the cooler at that time.
Did you recognize the male?
When he closed the door to the cooler and he turned around and we made eye contact, I knew, I was like, wait, I know this person. In that moment, I couldn't figure out where or why. My brain was still trying to catch up with me. But I knew I recognized him.
Okay. And did you ultimately determine how you recognized him?
Yeah, so he walked to the right and then turned to walk up to one of the aisles towards the front of the store, and he turned and looked at me again, and we locked eyes again, and at that point I recognized that it was Joseph Ferlazzo. It seemed to me, based on my training and experience, it was almost as if he were trying to figure out, fight, flight, freeze, what do I do?
And what did you say to him?
I said, Joseph, it's you, right? Are you okay?
This was Detective Sergeant Amy Nolan taking the initiative, and one of two reasons why the upcoming interrogation you're about to see unfolds the way it does. Joseph Ferlazzo was classified as a homicide suspect. She would have been entirely within her authority to draw her weapon, order him to the ground, and wait for backup to secure the arrest. Instead, relying on her experience and a remarkable amount of both courage and composure, she seized a unique opportunity when it presented itself.
What did he do in reply?
He took his drink down and his body language sort of deflated. And he said, no, I'm not okay.
She very gradually explains that he's not in trouble and not under arrest, but feels it could be a good idea for him to accompany her back to the police barracks.
So did you bring him back to the barracks?
I did. The other thing that we did sort of in that halfway point was I asked him and explained before I could give him a ride. It was our sort of protocol that we had to pat somebody down for weapons before I could allow him in my cruiser with me, and also because I don't have a typical cruiser with what they call the cage in the back to separate the officer from a person that they've picked up for some reason. So he said that was fine. He's indicated he had no weapon, so I patted him down real quick.
So it was just you and Mr. Ferlazzo in the ride back to the barracks.
Correct.
And did you speak to him during that time about Emily?
Not about Emily. I asked him, like I said, it was cold that day. I asked him, are you cold? And he said he was. I turned the heat up. I said, have you been out all night? Based on the interactions that I knew had occurred the night before, he said he had. I asked him if he, was thirsty, if he was hungry. He said he was. And so again, I told him, I turned the heat up and I told him I would get him something to eat once we got back to the barracks.
The journey to the police station took just under 7 minutes. The second factor behind how this interrogation unfolds is Sergeant Nolan's ability to brief her colleague at speed. It took roughly 30 seconds for the suspect to be greeted at the door by the precinct's commanding officer and walk to interview room 3, during which time she managed to relay the circumstances of his arrest and the precise approach required for this interaction.
What time do you shut better? We started 8. You did that 8. I do like 8 to 8, like a 12 or something. No, 9. It's either 9 or 10 hours.
I'm gonna go to the family. Hold you over. You don't need that? Okay, I'll go get ham, turkey.
Somebody, I know.
bunch of cops around. I said, fine,
Yeah, focus. I appreciate you there, but
you got it. All right, I'll get you a thing on it.
I'm not those kind of guy. Really sweet, huh? I laid off sugar for a while. Yeah. And then, oh my God.
In the blanket.
Yeah, there you go. It's cold out there. Been here for a while. Yeah. Turn to here. New base that I got. I can't. I'll turn it on. My wife today was the first day of daycare. Oh, awesome. Yeah, good pictures and stuff. Not yet. And I asked for some. So I was nervous this morning. You were. Yeah, I've never been to a daycare before. Gonna come back with like a runny nose. Yeah, right. That's how I got right from the first foot of it. Did you? I was 2019. This cute little kid, literally his entire face was over. They were beautiful. And, yeah, huge, like face for eyeballs, like big long lashes like this. Yeah. And I'm holding the bed arms like that. I'm looking at one. I'm six for then. But it was either bouncing on my lap. Sure enough, you get that. Yeah. I think it was open. It was like it was like smell and taste and all that. Crazy. Not really. It was kind of like you're right in the middle or blue. Yeah, yeah.
He talks about COVID for another 2 minutes while the detective continues pretending to be interested in what he has to say.
Because I didn't mask and I touched things and I didn't use hand sanitizer every second. Really, I lived my life the way I was living it. Yeah. I just had the negative. Yeah. I'm pretty sure whatever the fuck that thing was in 19 was that thing. The big bad boogie monster. Yeah, right. Of the super flu that you had to shut America down for. Crazy time.
He launches into a brief monologue on the global economic fallout of the pandemic.
But like everybody's like spending their savings, so then but then it jumped back up. Yeah. I imagine that's gotta be business people all probably. Cool. Joe, you're the guy, is it Joe or Joseph? What do you prefer? Do you have a preference? Whatever's here for you. Whatever you prefer. I'm Jim. Dave? Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Hi. That's all right. Jim, okay. Well, I'm happy. Hang right there. I'm big friend. All right. Yeah. Appreciate it. We're just gonna shut the door just for privacy purposes. I'm sure you saw there's a few people walking around.
The actual reason the door is being shut is because it locks from the outside, a standard safety protocol for high-risk cases in Franklin County.
We need,
The detective appears noticeably uneasy about the pocket knife being left on the table. He'll be visibly on edge during the early stages of this interrogation, yet still perform exceptionally well. And this is perhaps our favorite interrogator so far on this channel, because he is the exact opposite of the person he is sitting across the table from.
you need anything? You got water, somebody got some food? Yeah, I'm good. Okay. All right. So like I said, my name is James. This is Seth. We work for the state police. We're detectives. And we've been trying to get up to speed on what's going on today. And it's our understanding that you might be able to help us and understand a few things. We are happy to listen. Our opening goal is to find Emily. And we're hoping that you can help us with that. Before we get going, I just want to be fair to you. Obviously, we're here in state police sheriff, right? Like I said, we're state police. So I just want to make sure that you're aware of the rights that you have. So I'll read these to you. We're here in Stan Albans for not. All right. Well, why don't we, I think what would be helpful for me is just have you start from the beginning of what happened and start from the beginning and we'll listen and then, maybe at the end we'll have a few questions, but we'll go from there. Is that fair? All right, so I'll turn it over to you. So kind of what happened. So I was living in New Hampshire for like the last month. So with my wife and her family. And it came to Vermont, we're supposed to have like a weekend away, like vacation, camping, like have some fun. And like as soon as I put the vehicle in the park, like my wife went completely was there like completely psychotic. And I shot her. Seriously. Now here we are.
All right. Can you, where did it happen?
Bolton, Vermont.
Okay. All right. So, I guess my next question is, when did that happen?
He says it happened early on Friday morning at the Bolton Ski Resort, which is 4.5 days prior to this moment. He then makes a passing comment about, quote, cleaning up after the incident.
Okay. Describe what you mean when you say you cleaned up.
There's blood coming in my head, so I go for it. Blood. And then there's blood. Just like everything.
Where is it?
Even
Where in the butt?
the bathroom.
She's in the bathroom. I have been bus. So can you describe the bus for me? Like, what's the layout? You walk through the doors.
And then taking in a bit.
He draws out a diagram of the inside of the camper van.
So after you kind of clean up and you put Emily in the bathroom, what do you do?
Following morning, I had breakfast with my sister. Had some coffee and some breakfast with her.
Tell me about that.
I had some coffee and some breakfast with my sister.
In the Airbnb.
Um, the coffee was in there, and we were down the street for some breakfast.
Okay. Did you talk about what had happened?
No,
No.
no, I was being her boyfriend. So,
Okay. All right. Did they ask about the blame?
yeah,
What they said? What they asked?
just like, what's her deal?
What did you say?
I was like, yeah, you know, my role is like her husband, but also I'm just a fucking guy. But
Did they ask where she was when you went up breakfast?
Mhm.
What did you say?
what do you think?
Okay. So. All right.
He rambles through a series of unrelated tangents before getting to the moment when his friend was driving him back to the camper van, and he saw the police officers waiting outside.
Turn the car around, you know, like, listen, I'm gonna jump out of the car, so like, you do this right now. Even for you, I'm gonna go for you. Yeah, and you drove away.
Where did you sleep last night?
Um, under it was dark. It was hard to start flowing. Right myself up, I was breathing, considering. Found place and it was crazy windy. Pretty great. Trying to stay warm.
Okay.
Under it, like,
Well, I appreciate you telling me all that, kind of doing the time span from Friday to got to Vermont, so kind of how we ended up here today. What I,
feel like,
yeah, I think, yeah. But what I'd like to do is really focus in on Friday itself and the incident with you and Emily, and kind of go over that with a little bit more detail. Is that fair? Uh, so my understanding from what you told me is that you got into Vermont between 7 and 8 p.m.
The initial release of the interrogation footage cuts out at this moment. What we know is that they decided to take a break, and Joseph went to use the bathroom. The footage resumes 13 minutes later. Joseph's demeanor while outside the interrogation room was reportedly bizarre, which officers later described as a feigned mild panic attack, noting that he appeared to be forcing a state of vulnerability as a way of presenting himself as the victim. You'll see remnants of it as he now interacts with the officer who escorted him to the bathroom.
Now they're in company. Yeah, I'll be right here. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I'll stay with you. I'm fan. Yeah. That's me here.
Are you the individual that sort of comes in during the breaks and sits with Mr. Verlazo?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, certainly. No problem. Oh, you've been in Vermont? I've been in Vermont. I don't like. Yeah. I've been on the state police for almost 24 years now. Yeah. Yeah. What's your favorite part of it?
A very interesting detail of this moment is that Sergeant Truex could not once recall being asked such a simple question in his 24 years of service. He hadn't once been to therapy, and remarkably can't remember a single moment where he actually sat down and reflected on such a straightforward concept. So the fact that the moment finally arrives from a psycho murderer playing with his food makes his forthcoming pause of contemplation somewhat absurd, yet absolutely compelling.
Trying to do the best we can for people's family. I live in, you know. Virgin family? Let me grab you a couple of, I'll go back. You don't need carbs, do you? You took all the bread off. Where is that? Little lettuce bread. Do what you gotta do, but. Well, I mean, if I'm not burning the calories, why would I put them in? Right.
They ease back into it by asking him non-threatening questions, mainly about his travel patterns in the days following the incident.
During the calorie leaving.
What was the plan with Emily's body? Like if the police hadn't shown up last night, have the thoughts, what was your plan?
I didn't really have a plan. Take it into the woods and drop it off.
Where?
I don't know. Like I said, I had no plan. I was just gonna take it into the woods and drop it off.
Did you use your phone at all to like search anything? Relate like were you like, what do I do? That kind of thing? You doing like Google searches or Safari searches about what you should do? So didn't look up anything. So okay. Just asking for the little make sure that's a little question. Did you use your phone to search anything this past weekend related to what happened on Friday?
No, I didn't have any questions.
Okay.
I think I was like, ooh, I wonder what the other team would do. Like,
When you said earlier that you put the bag over Emily's head, did you just put it over her head or did you put her whole body in the bag?
an hour about it, but
Her whole body bag, just trapped in.
um, so I cut her body and put it in the bag.
Tell me about that.
Have you I used a saw and cut her body into smaller, you know, wrapped it up and I'm gonna take it in the woods.
Where did you do that? Out in the butt? Where's the saw?
In the bus.
What kind of saw is it? Just practical thing. Just a hand saw? Did you carry any out with one? Every piece of Emily's body is still in that butt?
Or make a little circle in that one. Paper.
That's for.
Okay, you gotta go try them. And also wait. Every day go.
Well, those are the, those are the details that I was talking about that are important for us to know, I mean, at the end of the day, this investigation is gonna take time. Those details will come out, but, I think it's better to hear it from you. So, with that being said, what else haven't we talked about that is important for us to know about what happened?
That's it. We talked about all of it.
Yeah, all of it.
I don't know what else to tell you.
I think we're gonna step out for a minute. Do you need more coffee or water or anything?
No, I have one.
The bowl, get these bathroom?
No.
Okay. I think those are yours too.
No, you can't eat it on the family.
Oh, you don't? Oh,
No. Yeah. Sorry.
you don't need any starch? To play games with your stomach or you just?
No. No. I mean, if I was gonna go like maybe I needed it, but I'm sitting here, not doing anything. Like, it's good.
When you would leave the room and come back in, did he recall who you were?
Yes. Passing moments like this may seem inconsequential, yet it's the prosecution's way of establishing mental competency, effectively neutralizing any possible argument that he was operating in a diminished or compromised state.
Not really.
No.
Not really. So past this part, I'm speaking of the next part.
Are the general or? Everything. First of all, the other detective, we're gonna make sure that what you're saying is true.
Here, just here.
First and foremost,
Yeah.
yeah, you were gonna verify.
Good.
You know,
Cigarette time.
Yeah.
Is it? You want one? Better.
The conversation was reportedly casual as they went out for a cigarette.
Something else that kind of comes to mind, having this open conversation that comes to last is like, to
Before this investigator went outside with Joseph for a cigarette, he was briefed on some additional details. One of them was that almost 12 years to the date, Joseph's stepmother was stabbed to death in her own home. The case was never solved. They also discovered that in addition to shooting his wife twice, he stabbed her 18 times.
is this the first time that sometimes this has happened?
Yeah. Yeah. As you were like
Pretty, pretty in depth.
fucking awful, dude. Like, I don't know if it was you or if it was Dane, but if you would have talked to me a week ago, it would have been on top of the list of things that I would never do. But it's been suicide fucking verbally. Like nonstop, like morning to night.
Emily was upset because the location he chose for their 1-year anniversary was the exact location his ex-girlfriend was staying, and that's what he's currently talking about.
A little bit less. But keep it.
All right. Well, I'm gonna see where they're at and, what- Go with the break. So this is the evening. Oh, okay. So you doing it for your team to take your picture?
They first take pictures of his face, hands, and clothing.
All right, so I have not watched your interview, but my understanding is that there was some kind of physical altercation with you and Emily, and that you made that struck it, something like that. Will you consent to me taking photographs of you without clothing on? And if you're not comfortable with it being me, I can have Robbie do it. To see if there's any bruising on you. I mean, we could get like I could do chest and maybe leg if you have underwear on.
What the hell did we just watch?
We could do chest and maybe leg if you have underwear on.
Our personal take on what he's doing here must have something to do with Sergeant Nolan's tactical display of approachability during their encounter, something that Mr. Ferlazzo has catastrophically misread, and maybe feels he can use to his advantage in this situation somehow, or perhaps just deepen whatever distorted sense of self this is feeding into. Whatever the case, it's just so excruciatingly embarrassing that we almost didn't put it in this video.
So let me, as part of the consent, to do photographs of your body as well. Okay.
Not a single bruise or scratch was discovered on his body, not one, though he was sure to point out some ever so slightly reddish marks on parts of his skin that he could have got from sleeping out in the woods, or perhaps a moderately hot shower. The moment he was finally informed that he was under arrest and going to jail was regrettably not captured on video. As mentioned before, the initial release of this footage came partially redacted, but you can rest assured that it will all come full circle before this video concludes.
All right, you're okay. Thank you.
The truth is that before leaving New Hampshire, you stopped at Market Basket.
The Market Basket supermarket was where he went to buy the tools to dispose of Emily's body, a moment beyond what he's now claiming to remember, and you'll notice how incredibly attuned he is to the challenges directed toward this assertion. His claim of having no recollection beyond a certain moment is designed to support the idea that he entered some kind of fugue state brought on by shock, suggesting that in his right mind, he would never have dismembered his wife or attempted to bury her in the woods. It's also the explanation he leans on for why he failed to clearly articulate during his interrogation how gravely his life was in danger, the key detail of his self-defense claim.
I did see that, yes.
That's the truth.
I saw that on the PowerPoint.
And it's the truth.
I don't remember it, but yes.
And you spent $60.43 at Market Basket.
Is that what happened? I don't remember sending the text, but you have it there in front of you, so.
And you said to her, I'll see you in the morning.
Okay.
And you said you still drank coffee.
All right.
So that's your sister.
That was what I said to her. That's you have that.
Would you like to see the text?
I don't remember the text. I don't remember the text exactly. So if you have them, then
Do you want to see them?
I mean, I don't have to. If you're gonna read them to me, then we can do it this way. Or,
So you've testified that Emily was mad when you got to Bolton.
she was angry.
A detail mentioned by several people in the courtroom who knew Ferlazzo personally was that parts of his speech and articulation had noticeably changed during this testimony, especially the word yes. The way you'll hear him say this word isn't how he usually spoke.
Emily's mad at you. You guys argue, is that correct?
Yes.
And she's rebuffing you.
Yes.
She doesn't want to dance.
No.
She doesn't want the candles on.
Correct.
She just wants to go to bed.
She didn't say anything to me.
She went and laid down in the bed.
Yes.
She's facing outward, scrolling on her phone.
Yes.
You're sitting down on the couch. Correct?
When
When Emily's saying these hurtful things to you.
You're sitting on the couch.
No.
You're in the bed.
No.
You're standing in the aisle.
Yeah, I was doing some.
You're yoga dancing.
Yes, that's correct.
You light some candles,
Yes,
and Emily doesn't like the candlelight,
that's correct.
and she tells you to put them out.
That's also correct.
And you don't put them out,
No, I don't.
and she gets up and she grabs one of these candles,
Yes.
these big Yankee candles,
Yes.
glass,
Yes, ma'am.
heavy,
Very.
and she starts hitting you in the head with it
Yes, ma'am.
and in the body,
Yes, ma'am.
and you're able to grab onto her and get the candle away from her,
That's correct.
and that is over. She goes and lays back down.
Yes.
When you came in, she was in the bed,
Yes.
and you are trying to relax,
Yes.
trying to enjoy your vacation,
Yes.
and you make a decision,
What decision?
the decision that you need to stop this.
I was having some drinks and smoking.
You decided enough is enough. I'm going to put an end to this.
No.
You got up.
During direct examination, he had a 1,000-yard worried stare as if lost in reflection. Here, he almost continuously glares at the prosecutor, perhaps thinking that projecting this abrasive display of confidence will render him more credible. The issue is that during direct, he presented himself as a broken husband who struggled to recall anything closely connected to the incident. Yet now he's steely-eyed and steadfast. You could argue that the change in questioning style caused the shift in his energy, but it's the extent of the shift and the complete disappearance of the emotional fragility he displayed earlier that makes the argument he is being deceptive. And just to be clear, I believe he's being 100% fraudulent in both these instances. His true self is still an enigma that I doubt has appeared once in this video.
You got up from the couch where you were having your drink.
I wasn't on the couch.
You told the police that you got up.
I don't remember talking to the police.
You heard yourself tell the police that you got up.
I saw a video.
And you
Nice.
heard yourself tell the police that you got up.
I saw the video.
And you got your Glock.
Are we talking about the video?
And when you realized you had just shot your wife, you didn't call 911.
No.
You didn't go and get your sister.
No.
You told the police that you put her wallet in a bag.
I don't remember talking to the police.
I understand that, Mr. Ferlazzo, but you've listened to the video and you've heard your words. So you told the police that you put her wallet in a bag, correct?
I did see the video.
And you heard you utter the words, I put her wallet in a bag.
I don't remember that.
You heard yourself say-
On the video?
Yes.
I saw the video, yeah.
And you heard yourself say, I put her wallet in a bag.
Yes, I did.
You're able to give her that tattoo and successfully give her that tattoo.
Still,
Still,
remember.
Mr. Ferlazzo, that is your clarification, right?
What we got here?
You did remember what day of the week it was when you were meeting with James and Seth.
From the video?
This is my favorite moment of cross-examination. He's about to make eye contact with the prosecutor, and something about how she responds, and perhaps how she looks at him, will shake his feigned exterior just that little bit.
From reality.
We are talking about the video, right?
We're talking about reality.
Okay.
So, Mr. Ferlazzo, we can agree that you lie.
Yes, I have lied to people
You're lying today.
about.
Everything.
I'm sitting here giving you my recall of what I have to work with.
No questions.
So as you heard earlier, multiple segments of Joseph's interrogation were redacted before the footage made its way onto social media. Yet the prosecution made certain the jury viewed it in its entirety. What you're about to watch is, in our opinion, the result of a potent mix of sleep deprivation, mental exhaustion, and an extraordinary lack of situational awareness, very likely enhanced by the calibrated framing that occurred during the opening sequence of his apprehension. He had spent the entire night freezing in the woods, likely terrified and in a state of panic, after coming down off a 3-day bender of drugs and alcohol. Then, while at his most depleted, he was met by a figure of authority who offered him warmth and understanding, followed by another reassuring encounter where the rapport seemed effortless and disarming. The focus of the moment was subtly shifted away from the horror of what he had done, onto his own inflated sense of worth and self-pity, followed by a continuous process of positive affirmations and ego reinforcement, all of which forged the environment and the oncoming result that occurred in the 3 previously redacted segments of footage you are about to watch.
How did that turn into, I understood you got her to explain how that incident continued?
Something inside me sort of nothing to know.
Can you describe Emily when you shot her? What was she doing?
She had stopped fighting and she'd go on and lay down. And then jumped on top of her.
How many times? If if you could talk to Emily's parents, is there anything that you would say?
I mean, clearly I would apologize for being such a kid.
What about Emily? What would you say about Emily?
You don't fucking treat people like this. I can tell you that I wish it didn't happen. I wish I could turn back time. I wish that I was just, I don't know. I don't know if you've ever just like wanted to be a dick. But I mean, I don't do it that well. Like, so yeah, I'm usually just like, we'll get it. He'll talk about it, fix it, whatever. But
She was being kind of, like I said, just to be a dick.
yeah, like, I don't think that, maybe like, suppose if you like, if I mean, I told you guys, you're just like looking at me, I'm sure you're thinking like, wow, this dude, what the fuck? Like, what pushes a man to do such a thing? Like, I would never do that. And not believe me. If you would have acted on that week, I would have said the same thing. Like,
I think I've read that in your shoes.
Had Joseph Ferlazzo been met with immediate confrontation and transparency, none of this would have plausibly occurred. His demeanor and method of response from cross-examination is likely what you would have seen throughout this interrogation. Yet due to the powers permitted under U.S. protocol, he was guided to a place where he could no longer walk back from. Now, before moving on to the final part of this video, we need to explore the nuance of this particular element and why that nuance matters. As many of you will know, the permitted use of deception in American policing is extremely controversial, as it's been known to put innocent people into prison through false confessions. Many of these cases have gone viral over the years, with perhaps the most recent involving Thomas Perez Jr.
Well, this video is incredibly disturbing to watch. The man being interrogated is Thomas Perez Jr. He reported his father missing. Fontana police accused Thomas of killing his dad.
It was August of 2018. Fontana police were convinced Perez's father had been murdered. They thought Perez appeared suspicious.
It's really concerning to me that he hasn't been back yet.
They asked Perez to come to the station, and that's where they turned a missing person case into a 17-hour interrogation.
Murdered your dad.
No, I did.
Yeah, Daddy did because of you. We just told you we found their dead dad.
They even brought in Perez's best friend to try and get a confession.
Impossible.
When that didn't work, detectives brought in Perez's dog.
We killed him. He's dead. And your dog sitting here looking at you, knowing that you killed your dad. You just stabbed. I think that I did. But if you did, where would you have stabbed? Might have been the gun.
They learned that Tom's father was alive and well and was at LAX airport, ready to take a flight to go visit his sister.
Steering filed a civil rights lawsuit in federal court against the city of Fontana, and the suit was settled for nearly $900,000.
Now, while both of these cases fall under the umbrella category of deception, you may have noticed they were starkly different in nature. One consisted of the futility technique and maximization. The inevitability of outcome was imposed to such an extent that it caused the subject to have an emotional crisis, while the other consisted of rapport development and minimization. There was no applied pressure nor manufactured sense of urgency, and the subject was given the space to construct his own perception of the situation, then full flexibility in how he chose to respond. One worked through fear and coercion, the other through guile and manipulation. But more importantly, one can cause considerable harm to the innocent, while the other presents a far lower risk of doing so. And as you've seen throughout this video, it can be somewhat effective when used correctly. But anyway, here's the remaining segment of Ferlazzo's redacted footage, right about the time where he realizes he just told on himself.
Knowing full well exactly where she is and what he has done to her. He texts her phone one last time. You're an asshole. I don't deserve this shit. Ms. Adams told you in the state's opening statement that this case and this crime is about ego. Mr. Ferlazzo's ego, and Mr. Ferlazzo's nearly 42-year-old ego being unable to accept his 22-year-old wife disrespecting him. An ego so inflated that after killing her, taking her life because he didn't like the things she was saying to him, because she didn't want to be with him anymore, he calls her an asshole. He tells her that he doesn't deserve this. The state submits that it is Emily and only Emily that did not deserve this.
How do you find Mr. Palazzo on count of first degree murder, guilty or not guilty? James, would you like us to poll? I would. And Mr. Sego, is that your verdict?
His reaction wasn't recorded as his term was read out, but Joseph Ferlazzo was sentenced to 45 years to life in prison, a punishment many have argued was unexpectedly lenient. He was subsequently investigated for the cold case murder of his stepmother. No charges have since been filed, and the case remains open to this day.
I should tell you first about the genesis of this theory, I suppose is the right way of putting it. When I was about your age, and I was back in the early 80s or thereabouts. And this was particularly true around 1984, but it was true before that too. You know, every generation has its worries, real or imagined. And the primary worry for people of my generation was nuclear war. And, you know, it was a genuine worry. At one point, many years later, I went down to Arizona to visit an ICBM, a decommissioned ICBM nuclear missile silo. And the ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, were very large rockets, right? They could fly halfway around the world. And it was deep underground and behind very, very thick steel doors. It was light green, you know, that pastel green that everyone seemed to like in the 1950s. It was like pastel green Star Trek console. That's what it looked like. And so we went down out in the yard, was in the desert, out in the yard. There was very, I would say, magical object, for lack of a better word. And that was the nose cone for the ICBM. And it was quite big, about that big, about that high, pointed like the point of a bullet, about 3/4 of an inch thick plastic, you know, kind of a resin. And it was designed to melt on re-entry. So that was just sitting there. So that was fairly thought-provoking, let's put it that way. And then we went into the missile silo. Interestingly enough, appended to the front of it, it had been decommissioned under Reagan, by the way. In the front of it, there was a museum with artifacts from the 1980s featuring Reagan and Gorbachev meeting multiple times. And it was staffed by these Americans from the South who were grandparent age, and they're just super friendly. And you know, they were happy to be in the museum. It was like going to visit your grandma's nuclear missile silo. So it was jarring, you know, because it's obviously a portentous place, and yet it was conjoined with hospitality, welcome. It was surreal in that manner. Anyways, we went into the silo, and they ran us through a simulated launch. So imagine a panel like this made out of metal, except twice as long, with another one of these things at the other end, 16 feet across or so. Basically 1950s technology, but updated. And then imagine that what you had to do to launch it was there was a guy with a key, and there was another guy with a key. And if I remember correctly, the keys were around their necks, although I don't think they were stored around their necks permanently. And so to launch the missile, you had to put the key in the lock, both of you. That was the safety precaution. It had to be two of you. Put the key in the lock and hold it for 10 seconds. And then away the missile goes. And it wasn't as big. The missile wasn't as big as the rockets that went to the moon, but it was plenty big. You know, the silo itself would have easily been as wide as this room is, perhaps larger, many, many stories tall. It was nested underground. So they ran us through a simulated launch, which was surreal, I would say. And then they told us that someone asked, and they said the keys were in once. Now, they wouldn't tell us when, but, you know, that would be during the Cuban Missile Crisis, because we were that close. And we were close again at other times, although perhaps not that close. And there seemed to be another peak of conflict in 1984, when there was a movie showed at that time called The Day After, which at that time garnered more views than any movie ever had on TV. And it was a story about the aftermath of the nuclear war and the people who were left. And it was pretty realistic and pretty frightening. And it turned out, as I found out later, that that movie actually was one of the things that influenced Ronald Reagan to put pressure on or negotiate with the Soviets, depending on how you look at it. And so, well, then, 5 years later, the Soviet Union collapsed. No one saw that coming. And it really didn't collapse in 1989 in some sense, like a huge machine like that doesn't fall apart all at once. It falls apart over time. And then at some point, it just becomes unsustainable and topples. And, it's like they lost faith in their doctrine and for good reason. you know, the system in Russia, the Soviet Union, which was a collection of states, an empire, and the system that Mao established in China, and the system that still exists in Korea as a remnant of the Cold War, and systems in Southeast Asia and in Africa were all predicated on Marxist presuppositions. Presuppositions that were utopian in nature and that posited a utopian future where property was held in common and everyone had enough and everyone was called upon to do what they could, right, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, which is a lovely sentiment. And you can imagine how it would be attractive, even intellectually, because of course, other systems, all other systems, produce vast disparities in income. It's like a natural law. It's actually governed by, you can model it with a distribution called the Pareto distribution. The Pareto distribution looks like this. It doesn't look like a normal distribution. A lot of you guys have been told about normal distributions and how many things follow on normal distribution, most things, but that's really a limited case. You can understand a Pareto distribution if you've all played Monopoly, I presume. At the beginning, everyone has the same amount of money. Will include property, the same amount of wealth. Then what happens as the game progresses, and really as a function of chance. I mean, I know you have to use your head a little bit in Monopoly, but the basic rule is just buy everything you can get your hands on. And then trade meanly, something like that. So at the beginning, everybody has the same amount. And then as you begin to play, if you had enough players, you would develop a normal distribution because some people would win relatively consistently and some people would lose relatively consistently. And so the money starts to be distributed in a normal distribution. But the thing about money and the thing about lots of things is that zero is involved. And zero is a weird place because if you're playing a trading game and you hit zero, then you're done. And it's very hard to recover from zero. And, it's really hard to recover. When you're doomed in Monopoly, you can tell you've got some resources, but there's going to be some crisis when you land on some hotel and you're going to get wiped out. You know it. So there's a point at which you're headed for zero, even if you have some, and you might be rescued by luck. But in the doom. So what happens is that as you continue to play Monopoly, more and more people stack up with zero, and fewer people have more and more money. And when the game is over, everyone has nothing except one person, they have it, all of it. Now, the funny thing about that is that in some sense, that's how trading games work. You might wonder why there is inequality in society. And it's easy to consider that it's because the society is corrupt and perhaps societies are somewhat or horribly corrupt. That's the variation. There's no society without its criminal element, fixed element. Anyways, trading games tend to produce a Pareto distribution so that very many people have very little and a tiny minority have a tremendous amount. That's the 1% that you hear about, right? And, the thing about that 1% is that that's happened in every society that's ever been studied. It doesn't really matter what the governmental system is. It certainly happened under the Soviets, that's for sure. And there was a lot of people who had enough zero, so they just died. So, the utopian dream was completely unimplementable for a variety of very complex reasons. One is that it's very hard to fight against that distribution pattern when people are trading because mere statistics will do that. And then there's other things and I should tell you as well that the Pareto distribution governs a lot of things. So if you look at books, if I remember properly, last year there was something like 1 million English language books published. And I think 500 of them sold more than 100,000 copies, which is none, right? That's none. And of that 500, you can be sure that one of them was by Stephen King, and he took half the money because there's like 5 authors in the English language who are on every airport paperback stand occupying the top rung, and that's massive real estate, right? Because it's replicated everywhere. And because they're so prominent and because they're known names, when people are in a hurry and they just want something to read, they just grab that and then more money goes to those people. And so, success breeds success and failure breeds failure, and it's not necessarily linear. And that's a really difficult thing to deal with. And it's hard on societies because one of the things we do know is that, as you stretch out the inequality, you make men, particularly on the lower end of the distribution, more and more likely to be aggressive. It's sort of like, you imagine every man has a threshold for violence. And status is important to men. Not that it's not important to women, but it's different. It's a different kind of status. Status is important to men because it's one of the things that makes them marketable as partners to women. So it actually turns out to be quite important to men. Men tend to compete with one another for status, hierarchy position. In a really unequal society, if you're like a low rung guy, then, and you don't have any opportunity to rise because the society isn't structured so that there's mobility, then the more aggressive guys tend to turn to criminality. And so you could say there's a threshold for criminality, and the more inequality pressure you put on a particular area, geographic or political area, the more inequality pressure you put on it, the more men slip past that threshold and into criminality. And there's been pretty good studies done of drug gang in Chicago. That was the best one. A sociologist actually went and hung out with the drug gang he got into it. I guess the drug gang leader was, I wouldn't say necessarily narcissistic, but that might be a reasonable way of thinking about it. And he was kind of happy with the idea of maybe being the subject of a book. And so this guy was able to associate with and got to know them quite well. And then the housing project in which the gang was housed was slated for demolition, and the gang broke up. And he got the books, because they kept books. And what he found was the average street drug dealer, first of all, was employed in another job as well, and was making far less than minimum wage. Now, but the guys, further up the chain, of course, followed the burrito distribution. And so there was a tiny minority of them who were raking in a tremendous amount of loot. And the guys at the bottom were just waiting around for the possibility that they could rise up the hierarchy. And, it's a pretty violent game. So the chances that someone's going to be taken out is pretty high. And then a little slot opens up for some opportunistic second grader, and perhaps he can move up the hierarchy. So the Pareto distribution governs all sorts of other things too. I mentioned it governs the popularity of books, the sales of books, but it also characterizes the distribution of everything that people produce. So if you think of creative production of any sort, artistic production, industrial production, it doesn't matter. Almost everything fails, and a few things succeed beyond anyone's wildest imagination. Apple's a good example of that. I mean, the iPhone, they have their competitors, but it's an extraordinarily dominant product, and they rake in billions of dollars. I don't know if Apple is valued at $1 trillion, but it's close to that. And that's a lot of money. And I think, if I remember correctly, it's something like this. I probably have the figures wrong, but like the top 40 people, the richest 40 people in the world have as much money as the bottom 2 billion. Right now, it's not like they're stuffing their mattresses with that money, or they have a skyscraper full of cash. That money is out in the economy doing whatever money does. So, you can't spend $28 billion. So, and sometimes you can even do some good with it. Bill Gates seems to be doing something reasonable with his money. But the reason I'm telling you this is because one of the things you should know is that this proclivity for inequality is pervasive among the creative products of human beings. It's the case with goals scored in hockey. My son told me, and he's a reliable source on hockey statistics, that if you don't count any of the points that Wayne Gretzky managed scoring, he still had enough points just with assists to have more points than any hockey player that ever played. So, you even at the upper end of the distribution, there's some person who's they're so good at what they do, and then there's another person that's so much better than them that it's not even comparable. And so, and the benefits flow to people who are in that position. We can understand why, I would say, because let's say you start writing and you get a book, and very rare things that have happened, and then some people read it and they like it, and then of course it's much more likely that you'll get a next book. And if people like that, well, it's even more likely that you'll get a third book, and then people start to know who you are, and then because they know who you are, they phone you up and offer you opportunities, and your network grows, and it's like this exponential increase in your reach and your capacity for production. And more flows to you. And then on the other hand, if you start to fail, and why would someone fail? Well, God. One idea that's very common in our culture is that poverty is caused by lack of money. And that's a really stupid idea, because money is very difficult to handle. I have clients who were drug addicts, and the worst possible thing that could happen to them was that they got some money. They're just done. First of all, they were hanging around with people who were a little on the sociopathic side. And so, especially if they weren't that bright and couldn't defend themselves very well, as soon as they got money, well, it was off to the bar with all the friends. And, one guy I remember in particular, every time he got his disability check, he was gone for 5 days. And we found him in a ditch, because he just go to the bar, spent every cent he had on alcohol and cocaine, and wake up in a ditch, 3/4 dead, eventually completely dead. And, then he was ashamed and horrified and repentant, and he'd straighten himself out again. And then that was all well and good until, as long as he was broke, until the next check showed up, and then bang, same thing. So, it's not like money is necessarily some good for everyone. It's hard to manage money. It's really easy for it to disappear. I mean, elderly people have a hell of a time now because, crooks are contacting them on the internet nonstop. So just giving people money's it's like pouring water in their hands. It's not that helpful, not necessarily that helpful. And then, of course, contributors to poverty are, well, it's not so good to have low IQ. People don't like the idea of IQ because it seems so arbitrary, have a high IQ. Well, it's not like you deserve it exactly. You're set up that way pretty much right from the beginning. It's very, 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 very stable. You can make a high IQ person stupider by, not educating them up to the level of their possibility, but taking someone who has a low IQ and trying to raise that. It's like, if you can figure out how to do that, well, it's Nobel Prize time for you, because people have tried that a lot. And most recently with those, lumosity games and that sort of thing. And the evidence that those produce anything other than brilliant performances on the lumosity game itself is basically zero. We haven't been able to figure out how to see, because intelligence is a cross-domain phenomenon. And you can get really good in a single domain by practicing like mad. And what you want is to practice like mad in a single domain and hope that it generalizes to other domains. That's the holy grail of intelligence increase. It's like, no one's done it. People claim it, but the claims never hold up. And people have been trying for a long time to do it, and they haven't been able to do it. And differences in IQ really make a difference. You guys, average IQ is probably 125, 130. At 115, you're at the 85th percentile. And 115 would barely get you going for a hard university. 130, you're probably graduate school material. 145, you're up there. You're at the range where you could probably do pretty much whatever you want. Although as you get smarter, the scatter between your abilities increases. So you might have a very high verbal IQ, but not be so good at mathematics, or the other way around. But it's a massive contributor to lifetime success. And I don't know what to do about that. I mean, why do smart people make more money? They get to where the edge of production is faster. So if you have 1,000 people and you rank order them by IQ, the smart people are going to come up with the new ideas first. And they're going to have more ideas. And they're going to strategize with them. And, with an IQ of 90, which is 15% of the population, think about that, 15% of the population. That's pretty much the threshold for reading instructions and being able to follow them. So, and our society is increasingly sophisticated, so it's by no means obvious. The liberals think, well, this society is unfair because there's unemployment, and the conservatives think, well, there's a job for everyone. But none of them think, well, there are massive, massive, massive differences in people's ability, far greater than anyone realizes. And that poses a structural problem. I had a client, and I got him a volunteer job, which is way harder than you think. You need a police check, for example. Like, it's harder to get a volunteer job than a real job. But we got him in a volunteer job. He had to fold pieces of paper, letters, because he worked at a charity. He had to fold pieces of paper in 3 so that he could put them inside envelopes. And then the letters, which were in a file, had to be matched with the proper envelopes, which were also in a file. But some of them were French and some of them were English, so the French ones had to be matched carefully with the French envelopes. And then if there was one envelope out of order, well, then he had to figure out whether it was the papers that were out of order or the letters that were out of order. And then some of the letters had photographs attached to them, and you weren't supposed to bend the photographs, but they weren't always in the same place. So that meant you had to figure out how to fold the paper in 3, a bunch of different ways without creasing the photograph. And then the other thing is, and I never realized how difficult it is to put a piece of paper in an envelope till I watched someone who couldn't do it. He probably had an IQ of about 80. If you met him on the street, you wouldn't think anything different of him. He was a normal looking guy, had some other problems. I trained him to fold those damn papers for like 30 hours. And he got reasonably good at it. But, if you're good at it, and you probably all are, you fold it and the edges line up exactly, like really exactly. The tolerance is probably 0.5 millimeter, something like that. Then you do the second fold and the tolerance is the same. But let's imagine that the first fold, you're out by 1/8 of an inch, and the second fold, you're out by 1/8 of an inch. So it's a little crooked. That means in total, you're out by 1/4 of an inch. And then it won't fit in the damn envelope. So then you kind of crumple the envelope when you put it in there, and then it gets stuck in the sorting machine. And so he sweated blood trying to do that job. And they eventually planned to fire him. So imagine what that's like. You can't get a job. And then so you get a job at a charity as a volunteer, and a charity decides to fire you. Really, that's just. So I talked to the woman who was running it, suggested that might be a little on the devastating side. She had her reasons. He was always asking people questions about how to do his job. And, so that meant he was interfering with the productivity of other people. And it was genuine interference. She wasn't being mean. And it was her job to make sure the place did what it was supposed to. So, you know, she was between a rock and a hard place. He eventually decided that the job wasn't for him. And relatively soon after that, I think it was too stressful. And he quit. So that solved that problem, except then he didn't have a job, which of course is a problem. It has a happy ending, this story, as far as I know. He got a dog because he was very lonesome. And that dog, man, having that guy train that dog, that was something else. That dog just, I think he lost 30 pounds while he was training that dog. Because dogs, they're, you know, dominant. He had to have a tussle with the dog to figure out who was in charge. It's a lot of responsibility to have a dog, but he was pretty damn committed to that dog, and he managed it. And the things he went through to keep that dog, you just cannot possibly imagine. It was surreal, just like with nuclear missile sighting. We had people following him around and informing on him because they thought he was abusing the dog. When in fact, as I watched, the dog was clearly abusing him. So he got a job helping a woman who trained dogs, and then he had a job. So hooray, you know, but it was like a miracle fundamentally. So anyways, the reason I'm telling you all this is because there was a reason for the Cold War. And the reason was that there's inequality. And there's different theories about how to address that inequality and different theories about why it exists. And there was a Marxist theory about why it exists, which was roughly something like property equals theft, and those who have more have taken it from those who have less, which, you know, seems to me to eliminate any conceptualization that there isn't a fixed pot of money. You know, money expands actually as we become more technologically proficient. And lots of people who have money have it because they've generated a lot of wealth. I mean, Bill Gates is a great example of that, right? He popularized computing. He made it possible for everybody to have access to computing. It's like, seems like a good for him, you know. And you can say the same thing about Steve Jobs, and maybe you'll be able to say the same thing about Elon Musk. You know, these guys have tremendous resources at their disposal, but you know, they're not bathing in banknotes. You know, they're trying to continue to do things. They use their money to do things. Anyways, the Russians set themselves up under Marxist presuppositions and tried to equalize the distribution of property. And to call that catastrophic barely scratches the surface. And I know that you guys probably don't learn much about this because for some reason people aren't taught about it, but you know, good estimates are that the Russians killed about 30 million of their own people between 1919 and 1959. You know, and it's brutal. It's brutal. A lot of that was through starvation. You know, I saw a photograph the other day, which we tweeted, which is the worst photograph I've ever seen in my life. And that's actually saying a lot, because I've seen a lot of really terrible photographs because I've done so much investigation into totalitarianism. This was a photograph that was taken during one of the early starvation periods in the Soviet Union, where about 3 million peasants died. It was a picture of a peasant couple standing behind a table at a market selling human body parts for food. It's like, and you know, I have this weird quirk, which I don't think does me much good, but maybe helps me understand things better. When I see that someone has done something extreme, I learned to do this a long time ago when I worked briefly in a maximum security prison. I try to imagine what I would have to be like, what kind of situation I would have to find myself in to do that. And believe me, man, that's a horrifying influx because it is actually possible, no matter what it is that you read about someone doing, and no matter how unlikely it is that you think you would do that, it's possible to imagine yourself in that situation. And that, well, that's enlightening. That's what I would say. That's enlightening, you know, because one of the things about enlightenment is that you get enlightened by doing things that are necessary that you really, really, really do not want to know, don't want to do. And imagining yourself as a perpetrator of that sort is, it tells you something about the world and it tells you something about human beings, but it's a hell of a thing to swallow, you know, in a very well-structured society like ours, where we're so peaceful, because we have the heat and it always works, and we have electricity and it always works, and we have plumbing, which is a bloody miracle, and it always works. You know, it's just one of the things that this imagination process has done for me is keep me alert to the absolute miracle that my life is every day. It's horribly cold out there. Can't grow any food. You die if you're out there for 24 hours. If any of this infrastructure was unreliable for any length of time, we would be in serious trouble. And it's never unreliable. It's so unlikely. And so here we are with all this reliable infrastructure. And because of that, we don't really have to compete with each other much. I mean, some. You don't compete for food. You don't compete for shelter, or some people do, but not very many. So it's very easy to think of yourself as good.